So typically here at Pondering Politics, we don't talk about breaking news or current events unless they deal directly with electoral politics or politics more broadly. So what I'm about to talk about may seem like a stretch, but it is very relevant to the political situation here in the United States. And on Wednesday, there was a tragic explosion as a result of a car accident, it seems, which killed 2 people near the U.S.-Canada border on the Rainbow Bridge. And while the investigation was ongoing, that did not stop Republican elected officials and prominent conservative commentators from seizing on this as a terror attack, and they started to point the finger at President Biden. But the FBI concluded its investigation and found that it had nothing to do with terrorism. But before we unpack all that, if you haven't yet, please hit that like, subscribe, and the alert bell. All right, folks, if you needed any more evidence to join the mountain of evidence, the mountain range of evidence that the Republican Party, in terms of its elected officials and its thought leaders, are just ghouls who are desperate, who are thirsty, eager to try to hurt President Biden and the Democratic Party politically, that they will jump on anything, look no further than this. Again, we're not going to dive into the accident itself. We're not a news channel. We are a political commentary channel. I'm sure you've heard about it. It's one of the biggest news stories of the past 48, 72 hours. And again, while that investigation was ongoing, Republicans and conservative commentators were just hungry. They were salivating at the prospect of pointing their finger at President Biden. And yet the FBI issued a statement. FBI Buffalo has concluded our investigation at the scene of the Rainbow Bridge incident. A search of the scene revealed no explosive materials and no terrorism nexus was identified. The matter has been turned over to the Niagara Falls Police Department as a traffic investigation. The FBI thanks our local, state, and federal law enforcement partners for their assistance, and we remain committed to our mission to keeping the public safe. Now, one of the Republicans who actually, and I'm going to point to his response, really good response actually, is from Republican former governor and presidential candidate Chris Christie. So he was called out by his fellow Republican presidential candidate Vivek Ramaswamy for his radio silence. He says, hey, this terror attack happened, Chris Christie, and you're making fun of me on, for demanding more security at the northern border between the United States and Canada. Why are you so silent today? And this is what Chris Christie said: radio silence from me because I have years of law enforcement experience fighting terrorists and crime, and you do not. You jump to the conclusion it's terrorism without any definitive proof. This is why your judgment is so flawed and you'd be such an awful president. Here's a hint for you. Wait for the evidence and then make judgments. That's what any experienced leader would do. He is 100% correct. And again, it turns out that people like Vivek Ramaswamy and others have egg on their face because it was not a terror attack based on the FBI investigation, and there's no evidence that it was a terror attack. But I'm going to play some clips here, a long clip here from CNN kind of breaking down, and they offer clips of the Fox propaganda network, again, just jumping on this with abandon.
But in the hours before we had a clear picture of what was going on here, it didn't stop one network from linking it to possible terror.
What I've been told is that this was an attempted terrorist attack. They believe the 2 people in that car, who are now both dead after that large explosion there, have packed that car full of explosives. As for what types of explosives, we're not sure just yet.
We don't know how long the people who perpetrated this attack have been in this country. Did they come into the country legally? Did they come across illegally and claim asylum? Were they some of the nearly 1 million gotaways who've come into this country?
Remember that most of these terrorist organizations, they're Gen Z, right? They're young. If you look at if you look at what Hamas puts out online, they're online on TikTok, and they're very sophisticated. It could be that these people were just inspired. It's pretty easy to figure out how to do this online, unfortunately.
And joining me now for more on this is CNN's Oliver Darcy. Oliver, wow, I mean, what can you tell us about how long they were reporting this as a terror attack so confidently, and how many people this bad information could have reached?
Yeah, I mean, this was irresponsible reporting. This was reckless reporting, and by all accounts, it was inaccurate reporting. We now know that the governor is saying there was no indication that there was a terrorist attack, but that's not what Fox News initially reported, and reported for hours. I want to give you a sense of how they reported this. Early on in the afternoon, they sent a push alert to all their mobile phones, people with the mobile app installed, and it said that the New York vehicle explosion is an attempted terror attack, according to sources of theirs. They plastered this on the front page of their highly trafficked website. And of course, Fox is a very highly rated channel, so millions of people probably saw this information just from Fox News alone. And of course, then there's the word of mouth factor. So a lot of people were misinformed by by this inaccurate report. And that's why Fox News really owes their audience and everyone else a correction. But they still have not actually issued a correction. They quietly edited out the huge mistakes on their digital online pieces. The correspondent who inaccurately reported this, she went on air and walked back the reporting while basically blaming her sources for bad information, taking no responsibility of her own for this. And that's really what separates, Abby, I think, a real credible news organization, one that you can trust, from a outlet that really doesn't have much credibility these days in reporting facts. When you make a mistake.
So yeah, listen, it's 100% true. Fox News is the most popular mainstream news network in the country by far. It blows CNN out of the water, blows MSNBC out of the water. And so especially after the Dominion lawsuit, which we talked about earlier this year, in which they had to fork over $800 million because of their perpetuation of lies and defamation against Dominion voting systems, you would think that a business of responsible journalists would be like, hey, we ought to be very, very, very careful about the things that we say. But again, it's pretty easy to understand why they did this in their zeal. Not only was it a salacious headline, right, which that's one aspect of the motivation, but Fox News is unique among mainstream news networks because it's ideologically motivated. It's not just about making money. It's about bending over backwards to hurt Democrats and President Biden. So the idea that a terror attack would occur on President Biden's watch, they salivated at the prospect. They love the idea of hurting Biden and Democrats politically. And then, of course, you have Midas Touch compiling brilliantly 30 screenshots of Republicans who spread lies about a terror attack. Receipts, as usual, we got them. Great stuff from them. So let's see. This was a lone Fox News reporter claimed she had a source that told her the vehicle was full of explosives and that it was a terrorist attack. Again, the FBI concluded neither of those things are true. DC Drano, who's a right-wing influencer on Twitter, seems like a logical theory. Tons of Thanksgiving celebrations tomorrow. Why would terrorists detonate on a mostly empty bridge? It was either accidentally went off or they got spooked by law enforcement and detonated early. Maya Flores, the blockades and CBP officials did their job today. A failed attempt by terrorists that could have cost the lives of many Americans. Border security is national security. Charlie Kirk, of course. There's no way that a mostly empty bridge in Buffalo was the terrorist target. Maybe they got caught. Maybe they panicked and decided to detonate right there. Maybe their bomb blew up early. And Joe Biden thinks all this should be allowed in without question. Secure America's borders. Andy Biggs. Our borders are under attack and the Biden administration sits on its hands. Let's see. Simon Ateba, again, refers to it. A terrorist attack. President Biden remains on vacation. Benny Johnson, the day before Thanksgiving, a terrorist attack drove vehicles full of explosives. This was an attempted terrorist attack on U.S. soil. Maybe the FBI should focus on actual national security threats instead of investigating Trump supporters. The problem, of course, Benny, is that so many Trump supporters are indeed national security threats. So maybe you all should stop being that, and then the FBI would have less incentive to go after you all. Ana Paulina Luna, who is a Republican congresswoman. So it begins, we need to lock down the borders immediately. Full deportation efforts need to begin. The U.S. does not need to be the world's hospitality suite any longer. Of course, you had Vivek, who we talked about, and so on and so forth. Laura Loomer, who is deranged. Jack Posobiec, deranged. Mike Kelly, deranged. Lauren Boebert, deranged, and yada, yada. Why do they do this? What's official? Republicans do a really good job. We talk about marketing and branding. They're better by far in terms of that than Democrats for the most part. They have better message discipline. They have the alliance of, the most popular news network in the country, like Fox News. They have very popular alternate media personalities and commentators like Ben Shapiro, Michael Knowles, Matt Walsh, Steven Crowder, Tim Pool, et cetera, and so forth. They have so many advantages on the left and on the Democratic Party. And they claim to be the party of freedom and the party of patriotism and things like that. But here's the thing. When Democrats run this country, or when there's a Democrat in the White House, the head of state, head of government, nobody hates this country more than elected Republicans and conservative commentators. I remember when there was a terrorist attack under President Bush, September 11th, 2001, if you blame George W., because that happened on a Republican's watch, right? If George W. Bush had been doing his job based on their logic, then, Al-Qaeda would never have attacked the Twin Towers. But if you said that at the time or even in the aftermath, years afterwards, you were condemned as an un-American, non-patriot. You hated America because how dare you criticize a sitting president during a terrorist attack. But it's a double standard. They want to write the rules in such a way that if anything bad happens on their watch, you give them a blank check and a free pass. You can't criticize us there because then we got to come together as Americans. But does that logic apply when a Democrat is in charge? Of course not. And of course, what makes this even more ironic is it wasn't even a terrorist attack to begin with. But if it was, then by their logic, they should have shut up, saluted the president, and been patriots. But they won't do that. They'll never do that because they hate Democrats. They hate Biden. They hate the left. And they hate the country when the left and Democrats have such a prominent influence over it. So this is further proof. This is what you can expect of the Republican Party. At the end of the day, for all their talk of patriotism, whatever love they have for this country, and that's being very generous, Republican elected officials and conservative commentators hate Democrats infinitely more than they love the United States. And if it's a choice, if you put them in a position where they can either choose to love their country or hate Democrats, they will choose hating Democrats every single time. So let me know what you think in the comments.